It is July, and already the year has turned. Birdsong changes, and preparations are looked forward to for the autumn and the second half of the year. The air is pungent with winds blown from the heather moors. And so I think about picking up the pins and bringing out the baskets to make cozier garments. I nestle in from the intermittent showers, though the sun is still warm. I have 2 new baskets, especially for knitting. I think you might have noticed that I'm a knitting basket collector. I have 2 new baskets. A small one made from elephant grass, and it has a very firm handle which has been dyed from the grass. It has a lovely feel and very useful little loops at the side to hold the needles. And a charity shop find for £4, made of beautiful wicker and a perfect shape. And I love to make a pleasing arrangement of baskets. I think that enhances the home. Here's the wool I have chosen. It's Mod at Rowan, alpaca wool, 50 grams. It's actually half and half, 50% alpaca and 50% wool, and it's made in Peru. And I have chosen a lovely shade called walnut. The gauge recommended is 3.75 millimetre, but I'm going for lace, and I'll be using a larger gauge. I bought the Japanese Knitting Stitch Bible a number of years ago, and frankly it rather daunted me. I've much more recently bought the 250 Japanese knitting stitches, and so this is a good opportunity now to have a go. The collection of 250 stitch patterns has been developed by the brilliant Japanese designer Hitomi Shida. It's actually her first collection, which was published in Japan in 2005. And for years, knitters have sought out the original book for its innovative sculptural stitch patterns. And when it went out of print, used copies became hot items on the secondary market. And now at last, the original collection is again available for knitters and designers. And her second collection was published in English as the Japanese Knitting Stitch Bible, which you see here. And that was published in 2017. The gorgeous stitches in the book are a product of a single brain. Like so many who found their niche in unexpected places, Hitomi Shida didn't set out to become a knitting designer, but during a period of recovery from illness, she was introduced to machine knitting and eventually qualified as an instructor. She later turned her attention to hand knitting. In 1990, she participated in a group show, which was her debut as a designer. And she began taking on work for magazines and yarn companies, and published her first book of garment patterns in 1996. And the next year, Shida began creating an annual couture knitting collection of fall and winter women's garments. She added a spring-summer edition in 2009, as well as ongoing work for magazines and yarn companies. And now she is one of Japan's best-known and most respected hand knitting designers. And her work defines Japanese knitting for many knitters. And so, as I say, I've chosen my wool and decided to finally follow one of her patterns and have a go. And I had to rearrange, which you'll see in later in the episode, exactly how I tackled and was successful in breaking into the Japanese way of charting, and I hope that that helps you as you follow through this episode. She has a wonderful variety, and it's actually been very difficult to choose which one I would go for. There were many, and I'm sure that I will be returning to more of them. So as we work through the book, you will actually see the huge choice as she has laid the photographs out extremely well in the books, so that you have a very clear idea what the finished result will be. The book is the books are of stitches and of charts, and so it's up to you to be able to apply them to larger garments. And so this isn't for people who are just starting knitting, I would say. It's something to aim for and to come on to. But you can see how very tempting it is to choose and to have a go at making these wonderful lace designs. There's a little collar. The text was translated into English, and there's a sock, but as I say, there are not instructions for larger garments, and so you do have to know how to lace knit garments. There's edgings and yokes. And yokes from the other book. So much choice. This is the one I've chosen to work with. It's 166, the basic. The one next to it is that with columns added. I liked this because it reminds me of natural leaves and perhaps cherries, but it's not too bumpy as a design. Now, of course, we have to have a little break, as cats always have to have cuddles. He's very encouraging of my knitting. So with the books, the charts are very complicated, and I felt I needed to translate them. The stitches are what we always use anyway, but the actual charts I wanted to make into rather easier way of seeing them, and also larger, so that I didn't have to be taking a large book around with me. So I'm using a piece of card which is much lighter and can be popped into the basket. And I'm going to use colour because I find that's the quickest way to be able to see a pattern if it's boiled down into little squares, which you'll see in a moment. It takes a little bit of time, but it means the final knitting is very, very quick, and I think it's worth it. And certainly Casper, he definitely approves. So as I say, just using the stitches we all know: knit, purl, slip, slip, knit, yarn over, knit two together, and I've colour coded them, taking those rather complicated charts and putting them into very simple squares. So a red is knit, and a red square with 3 is knit 3 stitches. There's a yarn over simply in a blue circle, and my purl stitches are green squares. The SSK is an orange square. So you see, it's really simplified what are really quite complicated charts for me to read. And in 166 number of her pattern, there are 35 rows. And you can see here I'm working on row 4 at the moment, so it's taking time. I sometimes just make them up as I'm knitting, so if I get to row 5, I will fill that in and then knit it. Now I'm looking at needles. I always do a gauge square. I always do a sample. The wrists are 2 knit, 2 purl with a 3.5 needle, and then going to a 4.5 needle. And I'm putting my sleeves into the elephant grass basket to keep them separate. And then I have my front that I'm doing, or it could be the back, it'll be the same, but started in my charity shop basket. I'm using Rowan wooden needles, and I bought another pair, they've just been delivered, 450mm, because I want a loose lace. Now with lace knitting, I mark out the pattern repeat, which is 28 stitches, with my lovely collection of stitch markers. And I want quite a large baggy garment, so there are 5 repeats. That's 5 times 28 stitches that I've cast on. And you can see I've done one whole repeat there of 35 rows. It's a lovely colour of walnut, and I'm calling the garment Walnut Wings. And you can see here the pattern starting to develop. And ultimately this garment will be blocked so that you can see the lace design. And I like to do my sleeves too at the same time. As I say, I'm doing a little rib, first of all, 2-inch rib of knit 2, purl 2, and then changing the needles, increasing the number of stitches for 2 repeats of 28 inches for the sleeves. That will have to be increased. Here's my Odd Me Bob's box, which I covered and lined. This is all the bits and pieces for knitting. And you can see my little bags of stitch markers there. I do love them. I've got, I don't know how many collections of those. I'm using them all the time. And they're kept on quilt pins. That's them safely stowed. Now I do have to keep a note of everything, and so I do have a knitting journal. It's a nice red moleskin, as you can see. I've been using it a great deal. I write things in because I forget otherwise where I am, and that's absolute disaster if you're knitting lace. It's very difficult otherwise to pick up and lay and then not know where you are is a disaster. There's the walnut wings pullover, and as many of the notes as I can possibly put in there for a lovely record of what I'm making, what I've made in the past. And this is invaluable to me. There's my wool, all ready to go. And more approval and more cat cuddles, a little bit of a break. I love to knit lace. I find it keeps my mind really occupied, and as long as I'm not lugging around a heavy knitting book, which can be rather a pain, I usually do translate them on the charts onto pieces of card. It's just so much easier to refer to as well. And though my eyesight is excellent for my age, I do like to have the instructions written very large, so that at a glance I'm able just to know exactly where I am. So here I am doing a purl. I think it's 9 purl stitches at this point in the pattern. There's a knit 2 together, and a purl, and another purl, yarn over, purl, etc., etc. And there's a slip knit. You can see I'm a very relaxed knitter. This is probably my knitting speed, so the progress that I've made there, which is 35 rows, actually took 2 days. It's very relaxed, and not at all, I'm not a speed knitter. I like lace because it's very becoming. I like the texture of lace. It can be quite loose fitting, but I think mostly the reason that I go for lace is because it does focus my mind. I do have to keep an eye on the chart and keep an eye on the knitting. It's always changing. Having said that, by the time you've done 5 repeats, then you start to learn that row. And of course, the more ultimate repeats up the garment that you do, there may be 3, I think, for the length of the garment, you do actually start to memorize a great deal of the pattern. Then you would do the front or the back, the opposite way around, and 2 sleeves. By the time I finished a whole lace garment, I have actually virtually memorized the entire thing without really having to aim for that. It just becomes it becomes part of you. And I do have to say that any lace garments that I have knitted, including my own design, are very much admired, that's lovely, isn't it? I've never machine knitted, and I noticed that the lady Shida, who has written the books, produced the books, began with machine knitting. And I'm sure with the internet it has become easier to chart knitting with the internet apps. But at the same time, I would love to go on and be designing my own lace designs. But as I said earlier, the amazing thing is, I find it almost magic, that it's still just knit stitches, purl stitches, knit two together, knitting stitches that we use so many times. I would say that one of the first things to do when you're looking at a knitwear designer going to a new book, just look and see. The stitches are often using different abbreviations, but they're all just the same stitches. I don't know why that is. I really don't. You would have thought that the whole thing would have become standardized across the world, but this simply isn't the case. So there we have an idea of the pattern. It will be blocked at the end so that this lace pattern becomes very apparent. Many of her designs use bobbles, but I didn't want to have bobbles in this one. I just wanted a rather more flat design. So I'm going to spend the rest of the episode looking at something that is following the theme, and I've been doing a Jane Austen theme. And so I thought you would like to see a book that again I would recommend, The Best of Jane Austen Knits. And I've knitted just one garment out of this, but I can highly recommend this book. It's an absolutely lovely book if you want to identify yourself with the era, which was the Georgian the Georgian era. And it has an absolutely amazing collection of beautiful, beautiful knits. And also some lovely extra pages about history and where she lived, the yarn that Jane Austen would have used. And here we are with the Georgiana shawlet from Pride and Prejudice, a little pinball, there's a whole variety. We have here an Aran for Frederick, that would be from Persuasion. A little child's bolero, very useful. Dressmaking in Jane Austen's time, absolutely fascinating. And then we have a pattern for a reticule. I think this would be rather large reticule. And gloves, very elegant gloves. We have stockings, that would be rather nice for bed socks. Sense and Sensibility. And Benwick, again, that's Persuasion. A very strong blue, but that would be rather nice knitted in any colour. Very useful cardigan, I think. A little teapot if you want to go and have tea, Jane Austen style. And this is an interesting chapter on the yarns. Barnton Cottage, that's Sense and Sensibility. It was just an absolutely lovely book. To get you into the Jane Austen mood. This is one of my favourite. This is Damask Mittens, and this is definitely one of my favourite. I really must get round to knitting those. A vest for Charles, that again would be from Persuasion. This is the pattern that I have knitted in the past. That was my very first lace pattern that I ever knitted, and it got me into lace knitting. Very useful little cuffs. Another child's garment. And the other favourite here, the Spencer. I think named after a member of Princess Diana's family. She was a Spencer. I think that's where that comes from. A sensible shawl. And the item actually on the front cover is Emma's overdress, and of course that would be from the novel Emma. It's a very sweet, there's a Claudette cardigan, there's a very sweet little bonnet that reminds me of the opening scenes of the film Emma with Romola Garai. It's a very similar baby. I wonder if it's the same baby they used. And then photographs of Chawton where she lived, and Margaret Dashwood shawl. And there we are with a pretty little sweetheart bag. So you may want, there's lots and lots to do there, and if you are following my Jane Austen theme and wish to get into the Jane Austen mood, then think about obtaining this. So, last word from Casper. The Japanese stitching books and the Jane Austen knits. And looking forward now to the chillier days in the autumn and winter. If you're at this hemisphere, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I hope it's inspired you in some way. Thank you for watching, and see you again soon. Bye-bye.